Sorry, I was running from all these people complaining about spoilers. You know, because there's gonna be a whole lot of spoilers here. This video has spoilers. So the yearly DCTV crossover just happened over the past week, and it was pretty good. This year we got us some Crisis on Earth X, where we fight some Nazis from a different Earth, so that's always fun. So as I said before, this video is gonna have spoilers, so if you want a non-spoilery review, I just recommend you check out one of those. This one's gonna have spoilers in it, because there's a lot of stuff we gotta talk about, because there's a lot of stuff that happened. As opposed to last year's crossover, where they were like, hey, let's fight some aliens. Oh, okay. So let's go in order with starting with the Supergirl episode, which was part 1 of this crossover. Just to preface this, I don't watch Supergirl. It's the only one of the shows that I don't watch, but you didn't really need to understand it to understand the episode. Basically, you got everybody. The whole episode is just an introductory episode. Everybody's they spend the first half hour of everybody coming together for Barry and Iris's wedding, and it's actually a pretty cool scene in the beginning where everybody's fighting different stuff. Like we got Barry fighting King Shark. There's Oliver fighting some ninjas. There's the Legends doing whatever it is that the Legends do. And then we got Supergirl. She's beating up a Dominator. Throwback Thursday. But it was on Monday, so Throwback Monday. It's not funny at all. Honestly, as its own standalone episode, that episode wasn't very good. But seeing as how it's the beginning of a larger story arc, I can forgive that it was a pretty lackluster episode. Yet, you know, still pretty fun to watch regardless. There's a little bit of a foreshadowing for upcoming seasons of The Flash, or maybe even this season, where Barry is getting ready to get married, and then some girl with water comes up and is like, hey, you want some water? And he was like, no. But she's like, yo, this is I'm ready for this. I'm ready to. I've been wanting to watch this wedding for a while. And he's like, wait, what are you talking about? She's like, never mind. If you ask me, I'm thinking that's definitely one of Barry's kids from the future, one of the Tornado twins, if you will. I don't know if they're gonna actually take that anywhere, or if that's just gonna be its own little Easter egg thing. But that's definitely some foreshadowing, if I do say so myself. I gotta say, that opening scene with Earth X Oliver fighting the Earth X version of Guardian was actually pretty cool. It's well choreographed, I suppose, and Nazi Oliver is pretty cool, you know, minus the fact that he's a Nazi. If it's one thing I gotta give this crossover props for, as just in general, is that it did not shy away from all the Nazi stuff. Like, we got straight up swastikas, we got the SS thing, we got the stormtroopers, we got straight up concentration camps. Like, that, they did not, like, you know, they didn't sugarcoat anything. They just straight up were like, yeah, here's what happens if Hitler won World War II, and whole world's run by Nazis, and this is what your life is now. This is what happens. Nazis are bad. So basically, part 1 was just an introductory episode where all the characters just come together and don't really do anything special until the very end, where they actually like fight off a bunch of Nazis. And the end of part 1 gives us the great reveal that Earth X Prometheus is Tommy Merlin. Getting spicy up in here. Honestly, I really liked the scene between our Oliver and Earth X Tommy, because there was this is a scene we've been waiting for since the end of season 1 of Arrow. And seeing as how Tommy hasn't even been mentioned since last year's crossover, and you know, even before that, barely mentioned at all. I really liked this scene. I liked how Oliver was like, yo, you kinda died. And he was like, yeah. Earth X Tommy was pretty insane, I got to say the least. He's all like, oh yeah, I'm gonna be all sympathetic to you. I don't even want to be a Nazi. And then he does a quick 180 mid-sentence, and he's like, yeah, I'm gonna watch everybody you love die. And I was like, oh, that's pleasant. Then he kills himself, because, you know, Nazis. Moving on to part 2 of the crossover, which was the Arrow episode, we got a bunch of stuff in which, you know, things happened. Episode 2 was still kind of a setup episode, like episode 1 was, but it was, you know, there was a little more action and a little more explanation and a little more development and other stuff that you expect of quality television. For example, we get the fight between Flash, Arrow, and Supergirl against the Nazi versions of themselves and Earth 1 Eobard Thawne for some reason. At least now we know, hey, Eobard Thawne is a Nazi sympathizer. If you thought Reverse Flash was bad before, we ain't got nothing. We got nothing on this guy. For whatever reason, he was still disguised as Harrison Wells. I'm guessing that was because they couldn't get the other actor for Eobard Thawne to come back, but it was cool nonetheless, and they use it as a nice little teaser at the end where he's like, oh, I wonder what face I'll be wearing next, where they tease like what's his name, Eobard Thawne taking Barry's face and doing evil stuff as Barry Allen. So that's pretty cool. Nice, more Flash foreshadowing, I guess. By the end of this episode, everything just goes off the rails. We got Earth X Oliver and Reverse Flash inside Star Labs with taking out Team Arrow and Cisco, and we got Felicity and Iris trying to finesse. We got the rest of our heroes on Earth X in a concentration camp or whatever, gonna get saved by my boy Leonard Snart, and the rest of the legends are just the legends, chilling in the temporal zone or something. Moving on to episode 3, we got some more cool stuff. We got our heroes escaping from the Earth X concentration camp, meeting with the Resistance, which was pretty cool. Which is basically like the Earth X Arrow Cave. So that's another bonus. We got our Oliver sneaking into the Nazi base, disguised as Nazi Oliver, because doppelgangers and stuff. It's weird. They do this thing with this new character, the Ray, where he's got like the light powers or whatever. Where his name is Ray and his superhero name is the Ray. They referenced it in episode 4, but like, why didn't they have a whole? Why wasn't there ever a joke between the Ray and Ray Palmer being like, "Hey, I'm Ray," be like, "No, I'm Ray." Oh, that's cool. It's Ray. See what they did there? They did a meme. It was a bit of a goof and a gaff. That was such a missed opportunity that like actually like lowered my enjoyment of this episode by an unaverage amount. One of the whole major evil plan of the entire crossover was that they want that Earth X Kara was dying, so they needed to take Earth 1 Kara's heart out and put it in Earth X Kara so she could live, which would end up killing Supergirl and, you know, probably leading to the rise of the Nazi regime on Earth 1. So, you know, that was interesting, I suppose. That in and of itself was a deep cut from the comics, but one thing that really bugged me about the whole thing was that they kind of just, like, drew it out for suspense. They were like, oh, we gotta prep for surgery or whatever, which I don't understand, because why would you need to perform actual surgery if you're the Reverse Flash? You could literally vibrate your hand in there, pull her heart out, and then vibrate it into the other one. I don't see how that... What? Did nobody think of this? Did nobody else think of this? Nobody in the writer's room think of this. Be like, oh yeah, let's just have Reverse Flash do his little vibrate hand thing, and yeah, no, they just, you know, we're gonna use a saw that Ray Palmer can easily stop. That's just intelligent design there. Intelligent design. Also in episode 3, we got this whole fight scene with Barry and the Ray versus Earth X Red Tornado, which was pretty cool because Red Tornado is one of my favorite Justice League members. Little known fact. The fight itself was pretty cool, using their powers in interesting ways, like, oh, I'm gonna throw the lightning bolt up and then we're gonna cage him in with electricity and short him out. It was pretty cool. The CG was surprisingly well done in this episode, but not as well in other episodes. Like episode 2, for example, where Kara, Barry, and Oliver are trying to save the workers or whatever on the building. The CG for that was just horrible. It was awful. Like, I could see that I could make out the polygons on Oliver while he was Green Arrow swinging or whatever. I don't know. Didn't look too great in some scenes. Some other scenes it looked so well. The end of episode 3 and then the result of that in episode 4, where Professor Stein gets shot and then eventually dies. Spoiler alert! I told you there was going to be spoilers. It was actually really depressing. The big thing in both the previous episodes of Legends of Tomorrow and the crossover itself was that Jax and Professor Stein wanted to separate Firestorm so that Professor Stein could be with his family, and then Jax could be on the Wave Rider doing what he likes, being a legend. So to do that, they're like, oh, there's a bunch of problems, like, oh, I want to be a superhero still, but I can't be a superhero if we're not Firestorm. And, you know, it's a whole paradox or whatever. where it's not really a paradox, but it's this whole thing where Jax wants to be a superhero, but he can't without Stein, and Stein wants to not be a legend, and he wants to be with his family. So I think that's something they can do. And then, in the end, Professor Stein is dead. He gets shot, and then he dies. And this depressed me. I mean, we knew earlier that Victor Garber, the actor who plays Professor Stein, was leaving the show, but I didn't think they would do it in the crossover. I thought they would have saved it for, like, maybe the mid-season finale. So I wasn't expecting him to die just yet, but I was like, as soon as he gets shot, I'm like, oh no, don't do this to me. One thing that really bugged me about the whole Stein dying thing was that nobody cried. They all looked sad, like they were going to cry, but nobody actually cried. Like that whole scene where Jax was talking to Professor Stein while he was dying, being like, "Oh, you were like my father" or whatever, and then the whole spiel. That would have been so much more effective and so much more powerful if Jax actually cried. He didn't actually cry. He just made his face. He made a face like he was crying, but didn't actually cry. Same thing with Stein's family at the funeral in episode 4. They did this thing where like they looked sad. They were like, "Oh, I'm sad," and then didn't actually cry. Like I didn't see any tears down there, tears on the faces. I didn't see that. Maybe it was there. I don't know. I might have to rewatch the episode again. But I mean, it would have been a lot more impactful if they actually cried. And for the 5 Firestorm fans out there, much like myself, who actually want to see Firestorm on the show again, don't worry, because I've heard theories out there that instead of Victor Garber, Professor Stein being the second half of Firestorm, is that they're going to go into the future, get Professor Stein's grandson, and he's going to join Jax, and they're going to be the new Firestorm. So we got new Firestorm, potentially. That's just a theory. Don't quote me on this. But for all you Firestorm fans out there, you're gonna get your Firestorm. Maybe. Probably. I don't know. Episode 4 was the big finale, the big action set piece, and I gotta say, it was awesome. It was pretty rad. Compared to the finale of last year's crossover, this was so much better. This was so good because, AO ended up with actual faces to the villains that they were fighting, instead of them just fighting a group of Dominators. Last year, they were just like, oh, a big old army, let's fight them. But this time, there was an army as well, but there was also actual faces to associate with the villains. Like, Barry had Reverse Flash. Kara had Evil Kara. Oliver had Evil Oliver. And they actually gave you, like, a sense of oh, yeah, we won when they actually ended up dying. They were advertising this as the crossover being, all the heroes from all the shows just teaming up and beating up Nazis and stuff. But they were missing a few heroes, like Martian Manhunter and Kid Flash. Where my dudes at? I understand that it was probably a contractual thing and maybe they just didn't want to do the crossover because they were busy with other stuff. But, that would have been cool to see Kid Flash and Martian Manhunter show up and be like, "What up? Let's fight some Nazis." Another thing from Part 4 that I rather enjoyed was the curb stomping of Metallo. I don't even know who Metallo is. I don't watch Supergirl. I don't know. But that scene was just beautiful. Just curb stomp this guy. You just combine all their attacks, just boom. Elon Musk, you're doing the work of God. Do not allow a being like Metallo to come into existence. You cannot allow this. I almost forgot to mention, we got Citizen Cold, a superhero version of Leonard Snart, who is not evil or a thug. There were some good scenes with him and Heatwave. I liked their, meeting up again where he's like, "Oh no, it's not a ghost," and he's like, "No, I'm not a ghost, I'm real," and he's like, "Oh, that's not pleasant for me, considering you're coming on Legends after this crossover." The rest of the Legends weren't in this until Part 4, and they were only in it for like the big actual fight, and then didn't really do anything else other than sit on the wave rider the whole 3 episodes. But they were a much welcome presence on the show. We needed some extra colorful faces here, as you can see. I was also quite fond of all the comic book Easter eggs and reworkings of comic book stories. For example, the entire title itself, Crisis on Earth X, is a reference to Crisis on Two Earths, which was a DC story about destroying the entire multiverse. Obviously, this wasn't the same thing, but still pretty cool. The concept of Overgirl, where Kara's pod lands in, Nazi-controlled Earth as opposed to regular Earth. So she ends up growing up as a Nazi and not like what's it called? Whatever, regular person. That's a reference to a different version of Superman, where instead of landing in America, Superman's pod landed in communist Russia. So rest of the world turns to communism. So that's a deep cut, I suppose you could say. Citizen Cold is a reference to the Flashpoint universe, where instead of being a villain, Captain Cold was a hero and was Citizen Cold. So I mean, obviously in this one he wasn't in Flashpoint, but he was on Earth X. So we got Citizen Cold in some way, shape, or form. There was also, much like last year's crossover, where Ray Palmer was like, hey, Supergirl kind of looks like my cousin. That's a reference to how, Supergirl's cousin in the show is Superman, and that, the actor who plays Ray Palmer once played Superman in a movie. So that's another reference. They did that again in this one, where Kara was like, oh, my cousin's gonna beat you up. And then Ray Palmer shows up as the Atom, and he's like, oh, I'm gonna punch Eobard Thawne in the face, which doesn't make any sense because he's fast as heck. But, whatever. Another thing that really bugged me about this was there were a lot of characters that were really underutilized. Cisco, for example, was out of commission for most episodes. Wild Dog had like maybe 2 lines. Same thing with Black Canary and Mr. Terrific. They only had 2 lines each in across all 4 episodes. Didn't really do much. They kind of showed up, got beat up, and then came in for the action set piece at the end. It also seems that they kind of ran out of evil versions of our characters to put into the crossover, because we only got evil Oliver and evil Kara, and the Nazi Reverse Flash was just the regular Reverse Flash, and then they just threw in Metallo and Red Tornado on the promo stuff just so it looks like there's more villains. But I think they easily could have done like an Earth X Sarah Lance, even though they kind of explained that she got killed in that universe. Or like an Earth X Ray Palmer, where he's, got Nazi shrinking powers. They're like regular shrinking powers, only he's a Nazi. What? Now time to talk about the Arrow subreddit's favorite character, Felicity. Because why not, right? Felicity had this whole thing over the 4 episodes where she's like, oh, I don't want to marry Oliver, and Oliver's like, oh, I don't care actually, whatever, and she's like, well, no, I'm gonna be indecisive for the rest of the episode, just for the sake of it, and that was just horrible. Then let's also just address the double wedding surprise at the end. I didn't think they were actually gonna end up doing this, but they did a thing. We got Barry and Iris getting married, and then Oliver and Felicity, they're just like, all right, spur of the moment, let's do it. And then it's like, oh, okay, that's cool. John Diggle made his first appearance in the entire crossover in the last 5 minutes. So shout out to my man's John Diggle. Pacing in this crossover was a little bit weird. Since they did 2 episodes a night, we had episode 1 where it leaves on the cliffhanger of Tommy, but then they, immediately pay that off in episode 2. And then at the end of episode 2, they're at the concentration camp. Then we gotta wait a day, episode 3, and it's like, oh, they're obviously gonna get out of the concentration camp. But at the end of episode 3, they did probably the biggest, most surprising thing they did all episode was where they kill off Professor Stein. They did that, leaving it pretty ambiguous at the end of episode 3, but then immediately paid it off for episode 4. They easily could have made this a 4-night event to, make the payoff even better and, to get better ratings for each episode, but they just kind of immediately paid off stuff that kind of bugged me. So, yeah. So, to make a long story short, if you like the DCTV shows, whether or not you watch all of them or any of them, you'll definitely enjoy the crossover, regardless of if you understand what's going on, with the character dynamics and whatnot. It's a really good crossover, much better than last year, and definitely probably the best crossover we've had yet, and I'm really wondering what they're going to do to top it next year, especially now that next year we're going to have other shows to throw into the mix, like Black Lightning, or potentially the Titans TV show. I don't know if they're going to end up crossing that over at any point, but if they do, that'd be pretty cool. We got even more heroes, so that's always pretty rad. This is really good. Definitely watch it if you like the DC TV shows. My name is Matt here at Chunky Games. That's all for this video, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.